Watch your thoughts, they become your words. Watch your words, they become your actions. Watch your actions, they become your habits. Your habits become your character, and your character becomes your destiny. That's one of my favorite quotes by Lao Tzu. It just speaks about just really the cycle from the thought all the way into your destiny. Welcome back to the Don't Recycle Project. I am your host, Pink Rose. And this platform, I created this so that we could break some curses, change some patterns, just get rid of these toxic cycles and move on and live at our highest expression. So thank you guys for tuning in. I am joined by an amazing, amazing guest. This man is an agent. He's a producer. He's been in Hollywood for over 20 plus years. He's also an author of an Amazon bestseller. His book, Shut the F Up Method, it's a game changer, y'all. I need y'all to go and get this book on Amazon. It has changed my life in just a few days on how I view the world, just really realizing how much control and how much power I have over my own destiny. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Mr. Jorge Perez is in the building. Welcome to the Don't Recycle Project.
Thank you, Rose. So happy to be with you today.
Thank you for saying yes to coming on the show.
Yeah, no, my pleasure.
Yeah, I want to just talk. I want to get into the book. Let's start off with the book. How did you reach that level of like mastery within yourself to come up with such a provocative title, Shut the F Up Method? I'm going to say F just to save the viewers.
I'm going to say F too.
Yeah, but
we don't know where we can put this, right?
Right, but and
Good
there might be
Morning
some
America
kids watching.
is going to be like, hey,
right.
You said F, so it can do it.
Yes, but how did you come up with like such a provocative title that would capture the readers to want to pick the book up and say, what is this about? And just how did you get to that level to write this book?
The genesis of this book was that both my parents passed from cancer, dad in 2019, mom in 2022. And after that, I took a deep dive on epigenetics, which is the study of how we metabolize stress. And I came to the conclusion that my parents' cancer was detonated by stress. Okay. And after doing that, I started studying a lot with Dr. Joe Dispenza, who does these incredible meditation retreats, which are all about regulating our nervous system and really controlling stress in our lives. But I had this huge epiphany, Rose. I've done personal development stuff for over 20 years, my whole life. I've been to India. I've studied with Tony Robbins, with Abraham Hicks, with Landmark. And finally, it was almost like it dawned on me that you can go to all the retreats that you want and seminars that you want, but if you don't shut the F up, it's not going to matter. We actually have to inject willpower into really sourcing and making the life that we want, you know? And once I did that, the book came to me.
When you hear Shut the F Up, it might seem like it's going to be, okay, watch what you talk about, but what is the Shut the F Up method?
So again, it kind of started as a joke because I kept noticing both participants and staff from all these seminars that I've done. They would hear all the science behind language and energy, and all of a sudden they would turn around and be like, oh, this food is horrible.
Wow. Okay.
So I started thinking, oh my God, if I ever write a spiritual book, it'll be called Shut the F Up.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, think about it this way. It's almost like if you know all the exercises and all the food diets in the world, right? And you can go to workshops and boot camps, but then all of a sudden you come back home and you're eating like crap. It's not going to matter.
It's not going to matter.
You actually have to shut your mouth and not eat. So I started thinking, oh my God, it's not repression to shut the F up. It's mindfulness. You know what I mean? It's like if you're committed to a diet or to fasting and you go meet your friend at a pizza party, you wouldn't be like, why should I repress myself from pizza? No, you actually, you have a goal, your fitness. And so it's the same thing with our lives. If you want to create the life of your dreams, you have to be mindful with what you say. There's so much science out there that's proving that what we talk about is what we manifest in our lives. It's you know, it comes back to quantum physics. You know, you look at the atom with the electrons, and the minute you look away, the electrons disappear. Meaning that when we notice something, when we see someone and go, that guy's a jerk, then we lock in those particles. So he has to keep occurring that way.
I think the fact that it's not an instantaneous or things take time to catch up in the physical realm. So as you described the atoms, they're small particles, but it's like for it to actually appear in the physical, it might be a moment, it takes time for things to catch up and manifest.
Yeah.
So we're not as disciplined. And I think that's the part, is being disciplined with your thoughts, with your words, because it's so easy to engage in small talk, or, like you were just speaking of, like the diet, and it takes discipline to like maintain. Like I set a goal, and I have to actually now like actively work towards that goal by practicing discipline and patience, and not just going back to old patterns and habits.
Yeah, yeah. We really have to take a stand and go against the wiring that we came with. Like think about it. Think about you and me. We're the descendants of people that were either murdered or killed or left their homeland.
A lot of trauma.
A lot of trauma, right? So here you are, you and me, wired to survive, but now it's Amazon Prime, right? It's like no one's coming to kill us, but
Right.
the stress that we're feeling is credit card bills, jobs, the metrics that our culture tells us to do. So all these things are adding to the stress. Not only that, but we've normalized as a culture survival based habits like gossiping, like looking to bad news, right? Like we're constantly looking into whether it's CNN or Fox. We're thinking like, okay, what's going on with Gaza? What we don't get is that by looking at news that spike up our stress levels, we're actually harming the physical body. And that's the mic drop moment of the book. It's like, so we're all born with this innate fight or flight alarm system that keeps us safe, right? But that same alarm system is the one that ends up killing us, because we keep gravitating towards stressful situations that lower the immune system and eventually end up hurting us. So we have to rewire that.
We have to. Why would you say we're so addicted? I feel like a lot of us are addicted to that feeling of being stressed or complaining. It's like, even though you might ask someone, do you like the way this feels? They'll say no, but yet their behavior shows otherwise. Like they're addicted to these feelings of fear. They watch the news just to feel this constant, like you said, that fight or flight feeling. Why is that?
Because science shows that we live 70% of our lives on fight or flight. That's just the normality of our culture. And since we came so wired to survive, that's just what normally we do. We gather around and we talk about, hey, how was your day? Oh, my boss, what a nightmare. And then like, oh my God, my boss is like that too. So here's the thing. We think we're bonding with each other, right? And I'm like, oh my God, I love Rose because I tell her about my day. And then we feel good and we're like, oh, but we didn't have a chat of getting things off our chest.
Right.
What we did is we dumped our problems on each other. And it's basically like we did heroin, like we did a drug together. So we're feeling good because we're going through the high.
Right.
But then in 2 hours from now, when that drug goes away, our body's going to crave that feeling again. So it can create the same emotion. And then another boss is going to come and do that. So we keep looping that cycle of stress. And that's why the only way to really take a stand is we have to disrupt the habits. In the book I talk about how I went to I was going to a barbecue with a friend. Left the car. He was in the car emailing, and I went into the clerk thing. I got the bottle, and all of a sudden, like a little old lady got in front of me, and I'm like, And then what was supposed to take 5 minutes took 30 minutes. And then when I left the store, and I went to my friend's car, what did you think was the first thing I wanted to do? I wanted to tell him about the old lady, they dumped the whole thing, but it hit me. I'm like, wait a minute. If I tell him this, I'm going to relive all those stressful situations. I'm going to continue this pattern. And I don't want to relive that anymore. The body doesn't need for me to relive all that stress all over again. So I just shut my mouth. I put the car in reverse and I was like, let's go. And I took a stand to go to an emotional detox space in that moment.
But that's the discipline I'm talking about, because I feel like, for one, what would that have even done if you did tell your friend? It might sound entertaining. Yeah. Okay, you guys have a few laughs, whatever, but it's like, what does that, like, it doesn't actually solve anything.
Yeah, it keeps the pattern alive. It's that, I also talk about, so let's say you're in your work environment with your coworker and your boss is a nightmare, and the two of you sit and talk smack about your boss. If you knew that describing him that way keeps him behaving that way to your experience, would you do it? Is it worth it?
No, it's not.
No, it's not. For what? For a 15-minute laugh or banter? So that's where, like in the book, I'm constantly, proposing these scenarios and questions so that you, the reader, starts to really kind of take charge
Right.
and take a turn into what is going on.
I used to like take offense though. Like lately, I feel like I've gotten better with this, but I used to take offense when people would come into my space and I feel like all they had was like gossip or small talk. It just felt such a like, is that all we have to bond on? Like, I have so much more to offer on a creative level, on just multiple topics, but it just, it seems like such a disservice to the relationship when it seems like people only find that common ground with wanting to talk about someone else or talk about a bad experience.
I talk about, in my opinion, right, and based on the stuff that I've studied, so gossip conversations, negative conversations, there's nothing wrong with them in like a moral term. They're just very survival based conversations.
Okay.
So they're conversations that it's almost like the lowest hanging fruit. And this is like a whole nother rabbit hole which has to do with like energy centers and are we more in tune with survival energy centers, which are the lower ones, or are we more in tune with heart and communication and stuff? So what I suggest, and I talk about it in the book, is we have to engage in some sort of meditation practice. I know
That's key.
some people are not really into that, but even if it's like a 5-minute meditation in the morning, it rewires your nervous. It's almost like you go to the hardware of the nervous system. So then now you can metabolize life a lot more gentler. So the guy cuts you off and you're not that upset, or you walk into your office and everybody's gossiping and you don't feel that knee-jerk reaction out of 10 of like adding. Maybe you're at a 2.
Right.
But little by little, Rose, you start you have room and you start detoxing those impulses. So what I created in the book are like the shut the F up 10 commandments.
I love that. Yes.
To kind of give you guidelines. So like the first one is if you are going to talk smack about somebody, don't say their name.
Okay.
And think about little habits like that we so innocently assassinate people's characters. If you and me have a friend that's Tom, right? Tom is our friend, but you and me have a dynamic where every time we go out, I'm always paying for you, and I'm like, Rose is, she's a little tight on the wallet. But the minute that I tell Tom, hey, I think Rose is a little tight, I just infected him with that.
And now his perspective of me is that.
And now he has to see, and then he comes back to me and he's like, Jorge, you were right. She never pays. So here's the thing. Can I be my brother's keeper and say, maybe I don't enjoy that dynamic with you, but why does he have to have it? So the minute that so can we take responsibility to take a beat and take care of our brothers and sisters' experiences?
That's real. I don't think a lot of us see it that way. We're so busy trying to, I guess, gain validation, and seek approval and kind of have our feelings validated. But why we need that so bad, I don't know.
Well, it's so innocently wired in our survival tendencies. You got to remember, like, our brains weren't built to be happy per se. Our brains were built to survive. So the more that I know, it's like there's a chapter called worst case scenarios.
Okay.
Our mind, I was with this girl on vacation with a bunch of friends and she didn't see her kid for 2 seconds. She's like, that face. And then she sees that he's next door and she looked at me. She's like, why do I have to go to the worst case scenario? So we do that instinctively because we think if we can survive the worst case scenario, we're going to be fine. So think about it. It's wild, but it's automatic and it's normal. So the meditation practice and shutting the F up will start to rewire you. So what I do is I reverse engineer. So you have the belief system, like the belief is I'm bad with money. Then you have the thoughts like constantly like I'm not good with money. And then finally like you say like, oh, I'm always broke. So let's go backwards. If you stop saying you're always broke, right? You don't have to say you're rich, but how about you just don't call up all your friends and tell them you're poor?
Right.
Then you're going to start detoxifying the thought and eradicate the belief. So it's the backward step.
I love that. It's like you're almost like speaking into existence what you actually want, not what you actually have. Yeah.
There's a chapter called We're Not Reporters. Like, you're not a reporter, man.
You're
not like, here I am in my shitty house, my shitty part of it. Like, how about like, instead of being like declaring what you see, right? Observing what you see in the world, why don't you become intentional about what you want to see? And if what you see is not what you want, just be quiet.
That seems so easy though. Like, it seems so easy to do that. Like, speaking to you right here, like, it's like, just say it how you want to see it. You know what I mean? But like, I find myself in certain scenarios and I'm like, the reality looks like this, but I have to remind myself that what is reality? Like, what is this like, what is reality? Like, we're actually creating it, and this is all
So, okay,
happening because
so
of me.
yeah, so what is reality? So
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example. So I volunteer at Hollywood Food Coalition, and we feed the homeless, right?
Beautiful.
So
Okay.
if I'm there
Mm-hmm.
and I'm looking at them and I'm thinking like, oh my God, this is the worst thing that could happen, and this is this, and
Mm-hmm.
how horrible, and then I'm doing a disservice to them and to me. But if I'm actually thinking, you know what, these people are doing the best that they can,
Mm.
and I'm here to provide a service. And because of them,
Mm-hmm.
I get to express the best part of myself that I can't do with you, Rose. Because with you, I'm being fabulous, and we're very
Right.
blessed to do this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But with that guy, I get to be that part of myself that wants to help a fellow man. So he's inevitably, very generously
Mm-hmm.
giving me the opportunity for me to be my best expression of myself. So
Mm.
that's the way that is reality, right? He's
Mm-hmm.
still, not that I don't think being homeless is something, there's something fundamentally wrong, right, in the
Right.
society with that. But now I get to see him as something else. If
Mm.
I'm looking at a war, right, Gaza or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
what if I choose to look at those people like they're taking a bullet for raising human consciousness?
Mm.
Because out of that chaos,
There's going to be
resolution
something that
will
births. That's
resolve.
great.
Out of the biggest chaos in the world, which was
Mm-hmm.
the Big Bang, a
Mm-hmm.
universe was created.
Mm.
If we're renovating our house and you walk into it in the middle of
It's
construction,
tore
it's
up.
chaos. And what are you going to take a screen grab, be like, oh my God, this is a mess, the
Right.
roof's falling. But out of that
Yeah.
chaos, we're going to get a beautiful home.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all we need to do. If you look into a bacteria tray through a
Mm-hmm.
microscope, there's chaos. But out of that chaos, a cell is born, a tissue is born, a body part is born, a
Mm.
human is born.
It's such a beautiful thing when you can look at it from from that perspective, because like when you're in the middle of the chaos, it's like, what is happening? Why is this happening to me? It's easy to go into that victim, standpoint and feel like you have no control.
Yeah.
You're losing things, and it just feels like life is just, like you said, chaotic.
Yeah, I think what we have to do is, no matter who we are, no matter what is going on in your life, millions of people would love to be in your shoes.
That was my favorite 10 Commandment.
Yeah.
I think that was the
Yeah.
number 8.
Yeah.
I read the book and I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
it was my favorite.
Yeah.
Like, people would love to be who you are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, I was I was going to the airport, and this Uber driver was
Mhm.
this really beautiful man from Africa that had just moved here 5 years ago.
Mhm.
And he was telling me how Uber was taking half of his money and all this stuff. And I'm looking at him, I'm going, I wonder how I can tell him about this shut the F up method and being generous at the same time and let him tell his
Right.
story. And then he asked me where I'm from, and I'm from Venezuela.
Okay.
And every time I say I'm from Venezuela, I don't know, I get the whole, oh, so how is it going there? And in that moment, Rose, I had never done this before, but I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do something different. And I go, Venezuela's my country, and it's so beautiful, and I haven't been there in a while. And he was like, oh, okay, but what about the ex-president that, and I'm like, I think that he was a manifestation of something that was already in the works, and only time will tell what his place in the Venezuela's history will unfold. And he looked at it like, I'm not saying it's beautiful,
But
but
you
I'm not
weren't like feeding
adding.
into this
Exactly.
negativity.
Yeah, and I could tell that when I told him this, I was definitely, impacting his own story of his immigration journey. And he was like, what religion are you? And I'm like, no, just shut the F up. And I'm like, no, I'm kidding. But I said, listen, we can all agree that everything that's been hard in our lives, in hindsight 2020, we can see that it was perfect.
Exactly.
And we can't forget that millions of people would love to be in our shoes, no matter who you are.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna paint a scenario.
Yes.
So you're
I
at
like
work. I've been in
scenarios.
this situation personally. I'm not gonna say any names. I'm gonna take your advice. So you're at work and you're kind of stuck in an environment with someone who won't shut the F up. You don't really engage, because I know in your book you kind of say, to validate people, you say, I hear you. And I love that, because it's kind of giving them the feeling that you're listening, but you're not really listening. You're literally hearing them.
Like,
So,
I literally hear words coming out of your mouth.
Yeah, so you're validating their
Existence
by saying, I hear you, but they just won't shut the F up. Like, how do you, what do you do when you're like stuck in an environment with someone who they just go on and on and on, and you're not even really giving them the energy or the feedback, but yet it's like they're talking to themselves, but talking to you at the same time. Like, what would you suggest in those moments? Like, how do you, I
Yeah.
guess, keep your energy
High vibe.
high?
Yeah.
Because it can be draining, like when you're surrounded by people who just don't know how to like
Yeah.
shut the f up.
Yeah. So I think it's almost like you have to look into a toolbox, right? And you have different tools that you need to bust out with right now. What I would do is first and foremost is like, where's empathy in this conversation from you? Like, how is this person? You don't know how this person came genetically wired. You don't know what trauma they have. You don't know their person. You don't know. You don't even know if they have the tools to shut up, right? So that's one thing, and it's also like you're obviously in this environment that you're choosing to be because it's your job, right? So that's a couple of things. So it's like compassion, you're making a conscious choice to being there, and then also like generosity, how you can be, and also how can you minimize being in that. And even maybe you said, yeah, I hear you're here, and then literally you start doing other things.
Yeah.
And you have to be with the fact that he might turn around and be like, God, Rose is rude, but you know what, you're done. And you can be generous, but that doesn't mean you need to stick around, and you got stuff to do. And but if you're coming from that place, I'm telling energetically wise, he's going to get it or she's going to get it. And then at some point you could be like, hey, I really have to get back to work. I don't mean to be rude. You know, the struggle is when we want them to be different. When you're fully in acceptance that they are who they are, the dog barks, the cat meows, and this guy talks like that, then in my experience, things shift.
Sometimes it can be hard when you're dealing with, that kind of energy, trying to keep yourself in a, high vibrational, optimistic standpoint.
Yeah. The first thing that I would do is like think back on, the quantum physics kind of model, right? And how you're the observer. So what you observe, where attention goes, energy grows. So if you're observing this person and he's got that behavior, she's got that behavior, it keeps growing, it's only going to get bigger. Like try to give it less attention. You're not there to solve their issues and give them perspective.
That's
like
true.
just stop observing it.
That's true.
And he or she, they're going to sort themselves out.
That's true.
That's what I would do first if I were you. Where you stop looking, it's the law of retraction. When you stop looking at something, it starts to fade away.
Let's talk about loss. Like as far as, I know you mentioned you lost both of your parents, which that to me is one of the scariest like thoughts, losing your parents, like two of the most important people in your world. How was that? Like, how did you overcome that? And I don't know if you're still dealing with it, but I know in your book you mentioned it as a painful gift.
Yeah, the most painful gift.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm so complete with how incredible they were. And I'm so blessed that, I was my dad's stem cell donor for leukemia, and my mom died in my arms. So I there's obviously a sense of completeness and a sense of pride and just love that I was able to be. Thank God I was. And I think the whole idea of loss, it's been difficult, obviously, but I also, looking at it from a panoramic view, like, Rose, I actually think, the whole experience of life is a big preparation for death. It's like we grow up, we lose our youth, we lose our friends, we lose our parents, we lose our health, and then we lose our bodies, So I think like their departure was, it's almost like the big preparation now for me to not just be like, okay, here comes like death, but also be like, I can handle everything. It's after you've buried both parents, obviously, as sad as it is, there's also a huge sense of completion and relief that they're not suffering, and relief that now I almost feel like their strength went inside me, and they've been now really guiding my future, and I feel their presence in everything I do, and I do believe, I mean, it could be a spiritual thing or religious. I do think everything is energy, and they're around. They're just not around in this physical form anymore. But I also think, and I talk about it in the book, I think Western culture needs to stop demonizing death. Death is the most normal thing that's going to happen to all of us. And we need to start normalizing it. And plenty of Eastern cultures have a better relationship with it. I talk about how like, we don't talk about death. It's almost like, one day you're gonna turn around and I'm like, hey, bro, aren't you like 120? You're gonna be shh,
Yeah.
shh, don't tell anybody. Like,
Yeah.
it's the big taboo, and
Mm-hmm.
and death is something that, you
It's a
know,
part of life.
it's a part of life. And as much as we have goals and dreams, and it's great, like
Mm-hmm.
plan on the big house and the family and the charity and all that, but
Mm-hmm.
don't miss the mark that this moment is all we really have. How many
Mm.
times diseases come out of nowhere? We hear stories that somebody, a truck came, and so I think that there. I had a friend that passed from cancer years ago, and she said that we're never gonna fully live until we accept that we're gonna die. And
Wow.
I think fully embracing death in a beautiful, normal way is the key to a peaceful, happy life.
Why do you think we're so like afraid of death though? Like, do you feel like it's because of it's just so unknown of like what's after
It's
death, or the fact that you
yeah.
won't finish whatever you feel like you're like? Why do you feel like a lot of us are so afraid of death? Like,
I think it has to do with we're wired to survive.
mm,
We're very innately wired to survive, and death is the ultimate unknown. So our body, our cells
mm-hmm,
are trying to survive. That's why we watch the news, because we're
mm-hmm,
trying to survive. Where's the war going on? Even though it's so far, but
mm-hmm,
our genetics, our cells are telling us no, know where
mm-hmm,
it is. So we're almost like retraining something that's been trained
uh-huh,
from generations,
mm-hmm,
and rewiring something. We're not starting at zero. We're in less than zero in many ways.
yeah,
But I think that's also not bad news. It's the opportunity. That's why we have great teachers, and we have a science now that's catching. 'Cause I do feel science and spirituality are kind of merging.
mm-hmm,
We're learning about brain states, and that also has to do with chakras. So we're always at the best point of evolution where we're at, and I'm sure 20, 30 years from now we'll be in a better place. But to answer your question, it's we're wired to survive. So
mm,
death, the big unknown, think about it, the unknown. Like, we're constantly like, you have a date tonight, you get canceled, like immediately your body's like, oh, what a
worst case
bummer. But
scenario.
basically, what if that yes is that no is a yes to something else? And what if you're
Yes.
like, great, my dinner got canceled, what's the unknown gonna
Mm-hmm.
bring? Like, it's funny, a case in point, on Tuesday I was supposed to have dinner with a friend, and she canceled day off, and immediately I was like, great, what's going? Then all of
Uh-huh.
a sudden my friend called me, he's like, hey, I'm having dinner at Bird Street tonight, which I've been trying
Perfect.
to. Then I went. So it's like, if we keep that outlook
Mm-hmm.
of like, ooh, this ended, but
Mm-hmm.
something else, the unknown. I'm very intentional about being excited about the unknown.
Mm.
It's like when my book came out, before it came out, I was like, should I self-publish or go through a publisher? And then I would meet somebody that self-published. They were like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, that's the way to go. It's the best way." And then I would meet a publishing person. They'd be like, "No, you want a bidding war when Penguin
Yeah.
calls." And instead of like taking everything, I was like, "Oh, I'm so confused." I
Mm-hmm.
was like, "What if this was the great unknown? What if I was
Mm.
like on a scavenger hunt?" I was like, "Oh, great, more
Like a
information.
game.
Oh, great." And wait until the final sign came and said, "Nope, this is what
This
you're
is
gonna
it.
do." So what could occur to us as like, oh, taxing and like confused,
Mhm.
could actually be like, ooh, unknown, exciting.
Mhm.
It's the great unknown. Death is the great unknown.
It's just that fear. I think we're programmed. I think
Yeah,
you were talking about like Western culture as
yeah,
far as like death being so taboo.
yeah,
I think it I think it's that way for a reason. Like this fear, it creates this fear to try new things, this fear to, but what if it doesn't work out? Or, we're just so afraid to put ourselves out there. But one of my favorite, like, I don't know who this quote's by. It's like, you're not going to make it out of this life alive. Like, no matter
yeah.
how safe you are, no matter what you do, like, you could sit in your house for the rest of your entire life, but you're still going to die. Like, it's just a part of life.
Yeah, yeah. I
And,
think that we have to, our big great job here is to try to rewire our
mhm,
survival tendencies as much as we can. And it's so counterintuitive. The more that you are not preoccupied with surviving, the better
mm,
life you're gonna have.
that's
And
beautiful.
that's the flip, right? That's flipping the script. It's like, the more that you don't watch the news,
Hmm.
the better you're gonna feel, the less stress you're gonna have, the healthier you're gonna be. And guess what? You are gonna find out about whatever you need to find out. There's no
Mm,
way that you won't,
hmm.
right? So we need to in my opinion, we need to start being mindful of what kind of media we watch. What kind of movies are you watching?
What you
What
consume.
are you feeding
Hmm.
yourself? What are you consuming? What you talk about, what you observe, what you ruminate about will become your life.
Sometimes you have to let go of certain relationships, whether that be a friend or a spouse, a partner. And I know in your book you mentioned having to walk away from like a numerous amount of like friends.
Yeah.
Like recently, I feel like I've had to do that more and more. And I've kind of questioned and second guessed myself, like, okay, so are you the problem or are they the problem? But I just realized, after sitting with myself and really like just like reflecting, I just feel like my standards are like raising.
It's throughout all the chapters. I think I
Uh
go
huh.
deep into friendships because I've always prided myself in being the funniest guy in the room, having a lot of
Yeah.
friends, and definitely after my parents passing, I've let go of a lot of people. But I've gotten to a place where it's not that I'm more spiritually evolved or anything like that. It's just like, listen, in our 3D world, we only have so much time, right?
Mm,
For ourselves, for our friends. How are we going to meet new amazing people if we're still keeping in touch with everybody we know? So I
right.
look at friendships as like, oh God, when those friendships complete, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 20 days, five
Mm,
days, they lasted the amount of time that they
they
needed.
completed their
They
cycle.
completed that cycle. And we do have a tendency of when a chapter closes on a
Mm-hmm.
friendship and we think back on it, we think back on how it ended, right? It's like,
Mm,
oh, you remember, like, she didn't call you or like she messed you over or
right.
whatever. But what if we retrain ourselves to almost take a screen grab of how great it was
Mm-hmm.
instead of remembering how it ended? Because how it ended, it's how it ended,
But I
right?
feel like we do that to kind of validate our reasoning for like, I think it's hard to accept, okay, if I like this person and I no longer, I feel like it's best that we don't.
Then you remember the bad thing that happened. I
Yeah.
think you're right. I think you're right. I just think that maybe that's a habit that we have
Right.
because it's like,
It's not a
again,
good habit though.
our addiction to validate. Oh, let
Right.
me validate the fact that we're not friends because she,
She
made out
touched.
with my ex or whatever,
Right.
right? How about we instilled and we cultivate a different habit of like, hey, we were there for each other, we
Mm-hmm.
completed, and I have to make time for more people, and she has to make time for more people, and it's done.
Right.
um, it's a new habit
Mm-hmm.
that we're not, I think, genetically too wired to do,
Mm-hmm.
but it's definitely, I've parted ways with friends where like,
Mm-hmm.
there's the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it works. It works to, yesterday I was talking about one of them to another friend. I was like, you know what? Those guys were so awesome to me and did all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to make a deliberate effort to think about it that way. The only example where that doesn't apply is when you want to get back with an ex and
uh
then you forget about all the bad stuff that
right.
they
But
did.
we have a tendency to do that, which is crazy.
I
Like
know. And
for
then your
some
friend's
reason when
like,
you're
no
yeah.
way.
Yeah. I
I,
don't know why
I
it's
don't know why.
I don't know why we do that.
I know. And then they remind you and you're like, oh yeah. Yeah, I
I feel like
did
that's
catch
from a
them.
different issue though. Like now you're lonely, so now you're just trying to search for they weren't so bad. It wasn't so bad. They
Yeah,
took
you're
me out
right.
to eat and we have fun. And it's
You're
like,
right.
okay, you don't remember them cussing you out in front of your family. We just look at the good, but no, you're so right.
I think I'm not very religious. I was raised Catholic, but I don't
Okay.
really. I'm more like, I love more like New Age studies and stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
the Bible kind of had it right when they said, "Love thy neighbor like you love thyself." If I hate you,
Yes.
I hate me.
Mm,
So I just think that we're done when you're looking at somebody and you're loving them unconditionally.
right.
That's when you know you're done. And an enemy is actually our angel because our
Mm-hmm.
enemy is allowing us to see our audacity, our arrogance, our
Mm.
addiction to controlling. An enemy is almost like a boot camp where like he
They make you
shreds
do the
you
work.
and grow and
Yeah.
so I'm so grateful when I meet somebody that I don't like and I feel that triggered
Mm-hmm.
because I get to see me and my controlling ways face to face.
But that's a heavy energy. Like even looking in hindsight at like friendships, like in the past that I used to do the whole thinking of all the bad things instead of just allowing it to have completed its cycle in a healthy way. I was trying to validate my reasoning for distancing myself. And that's a heavy energy and burden to carry because it just keeps you in this space of like almost anger, like you're trying to find a reason to be mad at them.
Yeah.
How did you master being able to love from a distance?
You know what? I think it's about being once you start the method, once you start the shut the f up method, and you start being mindful about how you feel, you're
Mm-hmm.
going to become just so much more aware.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at somebody, you think back on a friend and you think like, oh man, what a jerk. But
Mm-hmm.
then you think like, you know what? He was dealing with other stuff that I have no idea about, and he was doing the best he can. So it's like you start softening the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you do it to them, then you soften the guy narrative when he cuts you off on the 405.
Mm.
And then and before you know it, you start infecting yourself with this great infection of empathy.
It's like fake it till you make it.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
little bit of that at the beginning, but then your commitment starts to catch up with
Mm-hmm.
life, and it works. I actually sometimes I this past New Year's I stayed with friends of mine in
Uh-huh.
Uruguay, and the kids were okay. They were okay, but I kept telling my friends, "Oh my God, your kids are amazing." And I kid you not, Rose, they started throughout the days becoming more and more amazing because I
That's
started
real.
saying it
That's
and
real.
putting it out there. So when something is mediocre,
Mm-hmm.
okay, no, it's amazing.
Yeah.
You're gonna see. You're gonna
No,
be.
it's real. They even say that like as a parent, sometimes as a parent you can get frustrated with your own kids. And they say, studies have shown that if you don't like affirm like you're such a bad kid, you're so stupid, that's only going to make them continue that behavior because they feel beat down. Now they're living up to what you're telling them
Oh my God.
instead of saying you're such an awesome, you're so, even if it's not the truth at that time, they're gonna feel like okay, I gotta like live up to this. My mom
Yeah.
thinks I'm awesome. It's gonna make them want to like go harder and like live up to that, level that you're speaking of them
Yeah.
at.
Yeah. Like going back to the observer, you're
Uh-huh.
the observer. So you get to determine what you observe and what it means.
Mm.
So make it mean as best as you can. Like I said, listen, if the bank account is looking at like there's $5, like you don't
Do not go to the mall and ball out because you.
but you don't have to be like, I'm rich, right? But you
Yeah.
don't have to call up all your friends and tell them you're broke.
You don't.
could just shut up.
You don't.
And then like soften the narrative. People are like, how are your finances
Mm.
going? You know what? They're unfolding, but I'm
Mhm.
excited. I feel
That's a beautiful
things,
way to put it.
I feel that things are coming my way. But
Mhm.
Rose, what's coming your way? I don't know,
The
but I
unknown.
feel it. And then
Mhm.
they're like, yeah, but what? What's up? I'm like, I just feel
I
it.
feel
You know
it.
what? Until they finally leave you alone.
After this episode, I hope this breaks the cycle of just like listening to your own self and how you speak to yourself or about yourself. In your book, you said you're your own publicist. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people literally you'll hear them talking about their self and it's just so negative. Like if you hear them, they'll say, "Oh, I suck at this," or "I'm just not good at that." And it's like you're talking
Yeah.
about yourself. Like,
No, I know. I love the story of that chapter because it's about a friend of mine that would always be like, "Oh, all the girls in LA, they all want your money, and it's hard to date." And then time passed, and I was talking to another one. I'm like, "Oh, Kevin has a girlfriend," and they
uh-huh.
were like, and she was like, "Unlucky and
Uh-huh.
love Kevin that would always complain." And it dawned on me, I'm like, "Man, he's the one that architected
Mhm.
his whole reputation." And then we want to blame people for like, "Oh, they're talking smack about me." You told
You told them.
everybody. And
You told them.
I want to talk about this really quick because I think this is important. So earlier, before we started
Uh-huh.
filming, we are talking about, like those neurological diseases
Mhm.
that are the percentage wise are very small, but some people get them. And I work with people like that have ALS or MS.
Mm.
Like a lot of times I've talked to people that have ALS, which inhibits motor skills,
Mhm.
and they're normal people like you and me that just woke up one morning like, hey, this feels weird. And now
Whoa.
they're in wheelchairs. And 9 out of 10 of the people that I've talked to, they remember something emotionally that got detonated. And what I mean by that is this guy that actually was like my age, even looked like me. It was so weird.
Mhm.
He told me that he knows that the ALS got detonated because he would go every time he had a problem, he would tell everybody.
Mm.
And then not only that, so let's say the problem got solved, right,
Mhm.
with your best friend or whatever, but then he had to manage all those conversations because
Mm.
you have to manage conversations after you drop a bomb.
Yeah.
Betty's gonna come back to you and be like, "Hey, Rose, so
So what's up with
what you do with your
this?
ex? So remember, he did
Yeah.
this." So all of a sudden, you have that scab, and you're picking on it, and you're
Mm.
picking on. So the act of shutting the f up, the mindfulness, it's like. And by the way, I say pick one person and
Mhm.
tell them and let it out
Mhm.
and preface it by telling, "Hey, Rose, I'm going to tell you this, and you're
Mhm.
the only person I'm going to tell." That creates a bond between us. But literally, if I tell 10 people, and
Yeah.
that's not going to help the
That shouldn't be
situation.
your main conversation with 10 different people.
I'm gonna continue that addiction
Mhm.
of complaining.
Mhm.
So we have to cut that addiction of complaining and think about the physical damage that all those stressful conversations could do to us. We were talking about earlier too about how I believe the universe first whispers, and if you don't pay
Yes.
attention, it goes a little louder
Mhm.
until finally knocks you over the head. So when do you want to learn the lesson? I
Sooner than later.
Sooner than later. I talk about this other wonderful spiritual teacher that I had, that she lost her daughter when she was 10 years old in a
Mm.
car accident. And she said the most incredible thing to me that I'll never forget. She said, no parent should have to lose a child when they're 10 years old to learn the lesson of letting go.
Mm.
Learn the lesson of letting go when someone cuts you off the road and you feel empathy and compassion. Don't let it escalate to
So
that.
that's the whisper. Like
Yeah.
sometimes that's the whisper. It's not always about a sickness. Like I had a little pain or ache here. Sometimes it's just about
The
you're in
coworker,
traffic,
the
the
coworker.
coworker.
Yeah, that's
Whew.
the whisper.
I wanted to read this part in the book. It was really profound. Life is going to happen to all of us. And yes, some of us are going to lose loved ones to cancer. Some of us are going to lose the love of our lives. Some of us will lose our health or even a child. When I say lose, I mean it as the completion of a cycle, whether that's by someone or something going away or dying. This life is just a cycle that we're all like completing.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had anyone read it so beautifully. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
That was really that was really special.
Yeah. You're going to have me in tears and I got on makeup. You don't have on makeup. I can't. No, yeah.
I think I wrote that specifically, obviously thinking about my parents,
Mm,
because and that goes back to the greatest loss that we can have is also the greatest catalyst to our greatness.
mm,
And I think as much as we've been talking about the negative wiring of humanity, I think we can't forget the beautiful wiring that we have, which is to help.
mm-hmm,
And I think when we go through a loss, and we see it with people, mothers that lose their sons at war, and then they
mm-hmm,
start a foundation, maybe, I don't know, Rose, maybe we have like a soul contract that goes, hey, I'm going to go through this loss, so
mm-hmm.
therefore I can save millions of people. Who knows, right?
But it has to be
But there's
something.
something there,
Yeah.
right? Because I do feel that most people that go through a loss, whether it's physical
Mm-hmm,
pain or death of a loved one, we grab that pain and it becomes our greatness.
mm-hmm,
So that is the message of that chapter is that it's the chapter is heal faster, help faster. So
mm.
it's like maybe we need to heal so then we can be there for our fellow man.
One of my cycles that completed, I got married and that ended. And I'll tell people my story now. And the first thing, I think we're so conditioned to say, I'm sorry when people hear about things like that. But I'm like, sorry for what? Like, I don't think people realize, like, if I didn't get divorced and I didn't have that pain, like, I would not be anywhere close to this person that you see sitting in front of you. And like, that was literally what catapulted me into doing like, having, the highs, the lows, but those lows are what actually made me have to like go harder so that I could, get better and better and better.
Yeah.
So it's no sorry. It's really been beautiful. I think the pain makes you feel like it's not supposed to happen to you. Like when you feel pain, we associate that with wrong, but pain is actually a beautiful thing for us.
I look those incredible workouts and boot camps. Like that
Yeah.
pain is what shreds the body, and because of
Yeah.
that, the heart goes into a better state. Not pain and comfort is eating chocolate, watching TV all day.
Yeah.
That's really comfortable, but
Yeah.
that's what kills you faster. But that was really beautiful. It made me think like if whenever anybody tells me I recently got divorced or I
Hmm.
divorced, like it doesn't even cross my mind for me to say I'm sorry.
It's like,
Actually,
congratulations.
I actually feel that,
Yeah.
and you just made me think like, God, I could only hope. Like I have a niece, right? And
Hmm.
maybe one day when people say I lost my parents, people will be like, beautiful,
Beautiful. Yeah.
because there isn't in it is. I'm not. It's the consciousness
Hmm.
right now. It's where it's supposed to be.
Hmm.
Whenever I say I've lost both my parents, like I can see them. They have to get
Mm.
that I'm so sorry in there, and then I don't know how to. So then I have to interrupt myself and
Hmm.
go, thank you. But a lot of times it trips me out
Hmm.
because there's sometimes that I don't want to say thank you because I don't think there was anything wrong. But
Right.
then also I see that they're coming from a very
Genuine.
wired, genuine and just wired place where you hear two parents like it's, and I do it and I don't
So
realize it.
not so genuine. It's more like I think we're just so wired
We're
to
wired.
say certain things,
We're
and it makes you
wired.
wonder if you've
Yeah.
actually, are you saying that because you think it's what I want to hear, or
It's
like,
automatic. It's automatic. I know
yeah.
it's an automatic. That's why you can almost like get mad or not get mad. It's just conditioning,
It's
you know. And so
conditioning.
what you do is you have generosity to the conditioning of that person. But it's true. It's like whatever people. How did you think about the book? Well, you know, both my parents died of cancer back to back. Their
Yeah.
face gets flushed.
Yeah.
And they're like, I'm sorry. And then you go, no, it's okay. And
Yeah.
but I know that I think one day we'll get there. And I think it goes back to what I was saying about Western culture adopting a way of being with death a little more gentler.
Like we want to connect to others often. Like, so like the fact that your parents passed away, I want to kind of figure out how that resonates with me, but it's something that I have not experienced. So I think just naturally, like, it's like when someone hears something like that, it's so extreme, but it's like at the same time, I feel like they're searching to find how can I show
right.
that I understand you? But it's like, we don't
Right.
have to always like
Have the same
have the same
situation.
situation to show that we are understood. And sometimes I don't need you to understand me. I'm just telling my story.
I think you're right. I think you know, I think one of my intentions in chapter 1 was to show that a loss is a loss. A loss is parents a dream. A dream is a loss. You wanted to be an actor and now you're not. That's a loss. Like everything, we've all had to endure loss. So it's like, how are we going to grab that loss and make it the catalyst to our greatest not just healing for us, but for the world?
How has gratitude changed your life?
Oh, I mean, that's gratitude is the game changer. I talk about so I've created the GAV, right?
Okay.
So the GAV, gratitude, affirmation, and visualization, and every morning
GAV, I
and
love that.
every night. You want to do it in the morning or at night because because your brain is in theta, which is you're in your more receptive state. So I wake up every morning and the first thing I do, I grab my notebook and I write GAV. And the first thing I write is 5 things that I'm grateful for. Listen, I'm not saying like I'm feeling like earth and angels are whispering in my ear, but I feel, you know, like the bed that I'm sleeping in, the fact that I'm breathing, that it doesn't hurt, the fact that there's hot water, the fact that I have my plans for whatever it is. It's like I think gratitude, when we're in a state of gratitude, we are definitely in a state of receivership, and it coats us in a beautiful perspective of we have it really good. So a gratitude practice is a must. That starts to rewire the nervous system. It starts to rewire our survival tendencies, and it makes us better people.
For someone who's like new to like meditation, someone who's new to just all these practices that are the actual game changers, like what would you suggest? Like where should they start? Like, are there any?
Super simple. Get a notebook and write every morning. Write GAV, right? Gratitude, affirmation, visualization. 5 of each. 5 things that you're grateful for. Your shoes, you can breathe. The sun's outside. A new day. Affirmation, just as an I am form. I am, I am alive. I am well. I'm sufficient. That's it. 3. Do 3 things, and then visualizations. I write 3 things that I'm working on: a project, a vacation, anything that I can kind of use my 5 senses to be excited about: smell, touch, feel, taste, that I can see myself in those situations.
Okay.
And then jump into a 5-minute meditation. Go on YouTube. There's guided free 5-minute meditations up the wazoo, and just start there and start trying that out. Because the whole shut the F up method, the more that we are meditating and we have like the journaling practice of the GAV, the easier we're going to see how we're not going to be so knee-jerk triggered when somebody's gossip. We're not going to join in as fast. We're going to be a lot less reactive throughout our day. So that's how I would start. Just do a little gratitude practice in the morning with 5 things, and do a 5-minute meditation that you can find on YouTube, and then see how you go. Try it for a week, and maybe then you can graduate to 10 minutes in the morning, and little by little.
And that's why they call it a practice, because it's literally constantly trying to get, I won't even say better, just really just working on stilling your mind and just being more calm. But sometimes I'll sit there and I'm like, nothing's happening. But it's like afterwards I do feel better, and not even immediately afterwards. Like, I just notice how my day flows. I'll find like different things that I'm in sync with, and I'm just like,
Oh,
okay.
absolutely. Listen, a lot of times, like when I write these things in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
it's not like I'm like, oh my God, I'm so grateful for my sheets. I'm so grateful for
Uh-huh.
my pillow. But you just write them out. Just do trust it, right? It's almost like, well, the Karate Kid. It's almost like trust that wax on, wax off. You're
Right.
doing the
Just keep doing
practice.
the work.
Keep doing the work. And then throughout your day, then I get more pleasure now out of not getting what I want
Mm-hmm.
and seeing how I reacted versus getting what I want. And it's
Mm.
usually right before bed where I'll think about how I wasn't rude to somebody or how I didn't get the job that I wanted or the call that I wanted or the date that I want or whatever. And I get to pat myself on the back and be like, wow, I can't even recognize myself
Yeah.
because I didn't go into, poor me or this sucks or how dare you, but I was okay with it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's emotional autonomy is so much more valuable than anything in the world. I think when we can be okay with regardless of who's in your bed or not,
Mm-hmm.
or how much money's in the bank or what
No
house you
matter
live
what.
in, that's grace. Everything in the five senses, smell, touch, feel, taste, anything that's outside of
Mm-hmm.
us that we're going to get, the mind will recalibrate and say that's not enough. You're going to move
Mm.
to your house and then you're going to have this huge um, tax on your house and you're
Mm-hmm.
going to be like, oh God, or your
Right.
kid, it's like, oh, now he doesn't get into the best kindergarten or whatever. So
Yeah.
the mind will always recalibrate and be like, no, not here, over there. No, no,
Mm-hmm.
not there. So at some point you have to be like, no, pursue all those
Mm-hmm.
things, but from a state of contentment
Contentment.
regardless of those things,
Mm.
like real emotional
That can be a
autonomy.
struggle, like when you're trying to, if you're a go-getter, you have big dreams, big goals. Sometimes the feeling of complacency versus just being content, that balance, because sometimes it's like, no, this isn't enough. I want more, more, more. But it's like, but you have enough. Like, you have enough to get to your more, but you have to also take time to smell the roses, take time to just take this all in, because at one point this was your dream, you know?
Oh yeah, and in the practice of smelling the roses,
Mm-hmm.
it's what's going to actually attract
More
more
roses.
roses.
Uh-huh.
So you have to
More
stop.
roses.
More roses, more, yeah. You have to.
Yeah.
It is a practice, and
Mhm.
it is counterintuitive in the sense of, like I said, with the survival. We see it with little kids, like
Mhm.
they're crying, crying, crying. You give them that thing, they're
Right.
crying, crying, crying. So we have to have compassion for ourselves and for others and know that we're dealing with a machine that doesn't necessarily understand that we have everything we need right now.
Mm.
It's always looking at what's next. So we have to go gentle for
I
sure.
love that you called it a machine, like our
Yeah.
brain. It
Yeah.
truly is a machine of
Yeah.
its own.
Yeah, the brain is the most efficient computer. The brain is recycling 70,000 thoughts a day,
Mm.
and most of those thoughts are survival thoughts.
Mm.
And the brain is so smart that it wants to recycle thoughts and not create new brain patterns
Mm.
because it's
It
fuel
feels like it's found
efficient.
a way.
It's fuel efficient. So
Mm.
we have to be the one that hack the brain into new thoughts of
Wow.
gratitude and greatness. And that's why we do the gratitude
Mhm.
practice. And that's why we shut the F up.
Mhm.
We start like
Mhm.
we hacking it, but then that hack is going to become the normal state
Mhm.
after a while. And I can honestly say that I've hit that state in a
Mhm.
lot of my ways, and it's amazing. It's
And I think the
amazing.
meditation practice, to go back to that,
Yeah.
that lets you not stop thinking, because it's not about saying brain stop thinking, because as you just said, our brain is designed to, it has thoughts. But I think becoming that observer and saying, okay, the brain is, these are the thoughts that are constantly,
Yeah.
okay, and let me pull that thought out of there, or let me rewire that thought or change that thought,
Yeah.
so you can become more of the observer versus just absorbing everything that your brain is
Yeah.
recycling.
Yeah, you're gonna watch the thoughts, but they're not gonna have a chokehold on you
Uh-huh.
anymore. You're just gonna watch them. You're gonna look in the mirror and you're gonna see a new wrinkle and you're gonna be okay. You're not gonna
Uh-huh.
be like, I need to call this guy and get it
Uh-huh.
injected. You're gonna be like, all right, maybe
Mhm.
I won't stare at the mirror that long anymore in the morning. Or like, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? But
Mhm.
in a way that's more gentler, in a way that you're accepting life,
Mhm.
because we are all gonna age. The body's gonna do its thing, so we need to
Yeah.
make peace with it.
Make peace with that.
Yeah, make peace with
Yeah.
that.
How does somebody shut the F up without repressing? Like,
Yeah.
what would you say suggest to
Well,
that?
that's why, you know, in the shut the F up commandment number 2 is like pick one person.
Pick one person.
And by the way, when I say one person, it could be 2 or
Okay.
3, but maybe now it won't be 15 or 20,
Mhm.
right? And that'll make a difference for you.
So you're still getting it out,
Yeah.
but you're not just vomiting
Dumping
on
it
the
on
entire
everybody.
world.
Yeah. You know how it is. I've had them for sure where
Uh-huh.
like I have a crisis
Mhm.
and then I'm literally telling the Uber driver, I'm telling the guy at Starbucks, I'm telling everybody. So I'm creating those ecosystems. Then sooner or later they're going to be like, oh, here he comes again with that issue. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And again, it's like the story of my friend with the dating thing. Like we architect our own reputation and then we wonder why people are talking smack about us because we're the ones that
We gave them the scripts.
we gave them the script and now we're blaming them for it, right? So again, it's not repression, it's mindfulness, you know? Try it out. Again, I compare the pizza thing. It's like you're not repressing yourself from not having the pizza.
Yeah.
You're just being intimate with your commitment. What is your commitment?
And
discipline. Yeah. So tell that one person, tell your therapist. But even with your therapist, like, I mean, nothing against talk therapy, but it's like, how many times are you going to go through an issue?
Yeah.
Like, if you already talked about it and you worked it out, that's it.
Let's move forward.
Let's move forward, you know, and start spending your time talking about the things that you want, the things that make you happy. Start elevating people by telling them how great they are. When they're about to, when you see that look in their eyes when they're about to complain, be like, I just want to tell you that you always make me feel so good, and I love the way you dress. Get them out, like be
That will
good to
shift
your
the
brother
energy.
and sister. Like,
I'm gonna try that. You're right.
Yeah, like hack their
It
computer.
almost holds them accountable and almost gives them a mirror. So now that you gave them a mirror of what you want to see, and they're going to.
Yeah.
I think you would be crazy not to, like, okay, I have to now.
Yeah, because you know they're complaining to you and they're complaining to everybody else. But maybe you can do your part so you're not their punching bag, and you're rewiring them. You're rewiring you and rewiring them, and all of a sudden they were about to bitch to you and they don't, and you don't have to tell them that, but you know it.
Yeah.
And you'll be like, dude, I did good for my friend.
Do you feel like the subconscious is a tool that we are to learn to use to our, benefit, like as far as like programming and like?
So our subconscious runs 95% of our lives. You and I are having a 5% conversation right now. This is going to do nothing for us. Our subconscious is just our repeated thoughts over and over again. It's like, imagine how when you get into your car, you don't have to think about, oh my God, you're automatic. You can be listening to me, you could be on the phone, and you know when to make a right or a left. That's how our subconscious operates. So you could have the intention of losing weight, of not being reactive, but all of a sudden, your subconscious is going to take over. So nothing wrong, not demonizing the subconscious. We just have to know how to work with it. It's almost like our subconscious is almost like if your dog is walking you instead of you walking your dog. And now you're stepping and you're like, no, I'm the master and you're the servant. I'm walking you. I'm walking you. And the subconscious now, it's like, okay. So what we want to do is just almost like make friends with the subconscious by hacking it, by injecting it new brain pathways, by utilizing the shut the F up method. So then your subconscious now becomes the kind of subconscious we want by our side. The one that's not getting triggered.
It's a beautiful thing, part of us. Like we needed to, we're breathing right now because of our subconscious.
Yeah, like you're not thinking about breathing. You're not thinking, the subconscious is not the enemy.
Right.
It's almost like we need to retrain it.
We got to get on the same team.
It's like a kid. Like a little kid is like sticking his hands in his mouth. And you're not going off at him. You're like, you're being compassionate and loving until now you've raised this kid that's autonomous and beautiful and generous. And that's what we want. We want to apply that to ourselves, to our subconscious, because then inevitably you're going to apply that to the world.
I want to talk about authenticity and like the courage to be like your authentic self. Like, what does that look like for you, or how has that played a major like role in your journey?
I think authenticity to me is just cleaning up our story about the world and about people. You know, it's like, no matter who it is, the war right now, the whole Gaza thing, it's like, without taking, I'm not saying to take a side, but can we get in the world of why they are acting the way they are, right? So I think authenticity is like, whether, the political spectrum right now, whether you're on one side or the other,
Mm-hmm.
can you get intimate of why that person is seeing it that way? Or are you
Mm.
completely like, no, he's the devil and the other
Right.
one? So to me, authenticity is just like, be intimate with a person's point of view without taking their side and truly
Mm.
try to understand that you'll never know. You'll
Mm.
never know why someone's behaving. You don't know if there's a soul contract. You don't know
Mm-hmm.
if past lives this one did this to that one, and that's why
Mm-hmm.
now the perpetrator has to be the victim, and vice versa. So I think authenticity is like, what is the cleanest that I can clean up my story about you
Mm.
and move forward.
I think that goes back to one of your commandments that speaks on like listening,
Yeah.
like not to really respond, just like really truly listening and hearing someone else's story, or, just really being able to listen to someone so that you can have an understanding of that person from a neutral standpoint without trying to form a bias or trying to form an opinion. Just listen to who they are and, go from there without projecting onto them.
Yeah. A lot of times people just want to be heard, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't even have to do anything. Like, I had a client of mine that an artist that he was like, oh, but the client is like telling me all these things. And I'm like, maybe he just wants to be heard. Maybe you don't need to jump and like start like slicing the budget. Maybe you just need to just
Right.
hear him out.
He doesn't need you to validate him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Without you like, oh, but now, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, what if people just want to be heard a lot of times and they're not waiting for you to come up with a solution? That was my last chapter was going to be 46, but then I made an extra one. But 46 was about a friend of mine who
Mhm.
was telling me about a problem, and I was like, well, you need to shut the F up. And he was like, I wasn't looking for that.
Shut the F up.
I
Yeah.
mean, obviously he wasn't looking for, but he was like, I just wanted to tell my story. I
Yeah.
wasn't looking for you to give me advice. And
Mm.
and then I started thinking, I don't need to be the shut the F up police. I could just
Yeah.
be a safe place for people.
That's the one point that I want people to take away from this episode is just how powerful your words are and just how they are actually what is creating like your view, your experience, just the words.
Yeah, and not just words that you tell somebody, but I put a quote the other day on Instagram that was like, be careful with what you say, especially when no one is listening.
Mm.
So it's like even little things, you're gonna start catching yourself. Like you're on the phone with a friend, and
Mhm.
you think that they're just kind of like, that part on the phone when they're getting kind of annoying. You're like, all right, well, let me call you later, and then very innocently, no one's watching. You're like, ugh, what an idiot. But like, what
Mm.
if you paused and you
Mm.
didn't say that? What if you're, yeah, you really bring up a rigor of mindfulness
Mhm.
about what you say about people,
Mhm.
and catch yourself in those socially normalized moments where like, you and me are together talking, a waiter comes and he's a little awkward and he
Mhm.
leaves. And in that moment, very innocently, we would make fun of him. And I just go,
Right.
so what are you doing today? Like, take charge. Don't let your
Yeah.
friend go into those
'Cause
social
that's gonna be a
norms.
rabbit hole into
Yeah.
a whole nother.
We're like making fun of somebody at their
Mhm.
expense because they did something that annoyed us. And now we're like re-cementing that behavior. It's
Mhm.
like, man, this is so rude. I hate when people do that. Reinfecting us again. Like,
Mm.
take charge, be really mindful. And if you don't have anything nice to say, then
The
shut the
golden
F up.
rule is just shut the F up.
Yeah,
I love
exactly.
that. I'm so glad that I was able to have you come on the show and
No, I'm
just
so glad I came.
help
Thank
me
you.
tell the world about how we need to break this cycle of just speaking without intent and just cleaning up our inner dialogue
Yeah.
and then what we're also, pouring into the world. So I'm just so glad you were able to come join me and
Thank
talk
you.
about your book. Is there anything that you want to leave with the people?
Yeah, I just want to say that I love spending this time with you. You're awesome.
Thank you.
And uh and it's not about perfection. It's a practice, right?
Mm.
So you will, gossip here and there or
Hmm.
talk ill about somebody. Now I even, as a joke, when I do engage, I go, well, I'm going against my book, but I'm going to say that,
Right.
but maybe I'm doing it once a week instead
Hmm.
of,
7 days a week.
7 days a week.
Hmm.
So just be mindful, be generous and compassionate with yourself as you are in this process. And there's no right or wrong way. It's just about kind of acknowledging the progress and patting yourself in the back and be like, I didn't gossip that much today, and
Right.
that's huge because it's only gonna get better and
Step by
better.
step. go and get the book because it's a must have. It's a must read. I'm halfway through it. And I've only had it like 3 days, but this book has so many gems. You can find it on Amazon.
On Amazon, yeah.
So yes, Shut the F Up Method. Go get that. Thank you guys for tuning in to the Don't Recycle Project. Please continue to recycle your trash, not your trauma. Until next time, it's been real. Peace.